Hey y'all, this is Tammy with Second Shift. This is the third video in our Common Kid Advantage series. In this series, I'm sharing some of the unknown advantages that our common or typical kids experience versus the kids in foster and residential care. So I want to talk to you today about trauma-typical behavior. Let's define that. What do I mean by trauma? Trauma can be a one-time incident like a car crash or a natural disaster. Trauma can also be a loss, like the separation of a child from their parents, or living in an environment of violence, suppression, and fear, like domestic violence, neglect, or continual abuse. A single acute trauma injures the brain, but ongoing complex and developmental traumas shape the brain. Let me give you an example. If you're baking a cake and you pour the batter into a round pan and bake it, you have a round cake. If you pour the batter into a square pan and bake it, you have a square cake. So both are cakes. They taste the same, smell the same, and have the same texture. But there will be significant differences in each cake due to the environment they are baked in. So what do I mean by typical? Well, typical behavior for children is usually measured by common age-appropriate behaviors. We gauge normal by what most children do at various stages. For children who've experienced trauma, their behavior is normal for their development in an environment of trauma. In other words, they react normally to adverse or abnormal circumstances. So just like our cakes, children are shaped by the environment that they're in and experiencing while they develop. And their behavior reflects that development. Just like our cakes, children did not cause, create, or choose how they turned out. So a child who grows and develops during their first few years in a nurturing, stable, calm, and structured home learns to care for others, regulate their emotion, and trust. A child who spends their first few years in an environment filled with chaos, violence, unpredictability, and instability will learn that the only one they can count on is themselves. They will not be able to regulate their emotions or trust anyone. Regarding the kids who've been in foster care or residential care, 100% of them have experienced some form of early relational, complex, or developmental trauma. So their behaviors are trauma-typical. Let's talk about what these behaviors look like. For a child who's on target developmentally at 2 years old, we might expect them to not be able to delay gratification. They want what they want it now. They also might not be able to regulate their emotions, so when they're tired, angry, frustrated, hungry, or scared, their behavior reflects those emotions. They need people to step in and assist them in calming, resting, understanding, meeting their needs, and feeling safe. For a 15-year-old child who developed in an atmosphere of complex trauma and did not develop an ability to self-regulate, they will present the same behaviors as a 2-year-old when they're tired, angry, frustrated, hungry, or scared. However, they do it in a teenager's body with a teenager's experiences and a teenager's attitude. This might look very similar to a toddler's tantrum, but we're not able to see it in the same way because we expect an adolescent to present typical adolescent behavior. But a child from a trauma background presents trauma-typical behaviors. We can't expect a square cake with all the sides and corners to be round. Let me give you another illustration. A child who has a seizure disorder might also present behavior that appears to be a tantrum. But due to the differences in their brain, we would never hold them responsible for the things their brain tells them to do. And when a child with a seizure disorder has a seizure, we would never criticize or correct them. In fact, we would come alongside of them and comfort them. We would sit down next to them and speak quietly to them. We would reassure them and diminish the shame and the blame that they feel. We often look at behaviors as choice. We believe that the things people do are what they want to do. For children from a trauma environment, this is not necessarily so. They are in a state of reaction. Many of them do not want the behaviors they present. They are shamed and blamed for the things their trauma-typical brain tells them to do. They do not have the advantage that our common kids have in being able to override emotional reaction with logical thought. Being able to trust other people and regulate your emotions is a common kid advantage. It's yet another thing that makes our at-risk and aging out kids more vulnerable and at risk. Thanks for listening.